would like to invite everyone to their seats, and the third session for today is on international organizations. I call upon Speaker Baharan, General Secretary, Tamil Center for Human Rights, and Tu Senan, International Coordinator for Tamil Solidarity, to the podium. I don't have to repeat all the commandments from the organizing committee about rules and regulations and restrictions, etc., etc. So, my name is Chair, and I'm a professor in the Department of Sociology, Anthropology, and Criminology at the University of Windsor in Canada. I generally teach in the areas of globalization, transnationalism, migration, and ethnicity. So I will be facilitating this session. Our first speaker today is S.V. Thiruvaharan. He is the General Secretary of the Tamil Center for Human Rights. He has been working as a human rights advocate for very many years. I have seen him several times at the UN too. He has been very active in lobbying at the United Nations and various other international agencies to find justice to the Ulam Tamils. And the title of his presentation today is Role of UN and the Other International Organizations. And Kirba, you will have 15 minutes. And I am not going to be a dictator, so take it plus or minus one.
It's more than a dictator.
Good afternoon, everyone. First of all, let me thank the Tamil Information Center, especially Mr. Varadakumar, for giving me an opportunity to present a paper on the role of UN and other international organizations in promoting human rights, peace and development in Lanka in this Lanka Diaspora Conference. Before I go into the subject, I would like to explore briefly the term diaspora, but this has been already done by previous speakers, so I am not going into the detail about definition of diaspora and all. Actually, I made my papers because it's a little longer than what PIC proposed me to do, so I couldn't do the. I am unable to do the whole paper. I will cut short everything. So first, I will do first 5 minutes about human rights and UN. Then I am sure all of you will be interested in the political front. I will go into that for more 10 minutes. So I will try to do it within, which is possible within 10 minutes. Now let me look at the theme, role of the UN and international organization promoting human rights and peace and development in Sri Lanka. Since 1990, my work as General Secretary of the Tamil Center for Human Rights with the United Nations Human Rights Forum in Geneva, as well as with the European Union and European Parliament in Brussels, permits me to look into this subject from a pragmatic viewpoint. Anyone who has good knowledge of the United Nations understands that Geneva is a place for issues related to human rights, refugees, and also humanitarian activities, and that New York is a place for any political activities. In other words, UN General Assembly and Security Council are in New York. Therefore, I take this opportunity to explain as much as I can about our activities in Geneva. Here we should categorize our Ulam Tamil issues into two main features: human rights, humanitarian, and political rights. That is to say, in modern terms, accountability and reconciliation. Of course, accountability is the vanguard of reconciliation, but the question is whether we are going to put the horse before the cart or vice versa. Because access in Geneva is easy, some of our emotional politicians and political activities who have talk shows on the right to self-determination of Ulam Tamil waste time in Geneva, putting the cart before the horse. If we seriously consider today's UN human rights functions in Geneva, the right to self-determination has no place whatsoever in the UN Human Rights Council, unlike the earlier Commission on Human Rights. there is no mention of right to self-determination in the Human Rights Council. As a desperate approach, some make use of the Human Rights Council agenda on right to development to speak about right to self-determination. Without knowing this fact, some having side events on the right to self-determination, which is waste of time, proving that government agenda is keeping them busy for nothing. So now let me look at the human rights from. We can consider UN activities in Geneva. There are many special procedures, treaty bodies which we Ulam Tamils can make use to achieve accountability and justice for victims. The ongoing UN human rights activities in Geneva are taking place in two different levels. One is present Human Rights Council, which is replaced the earlier Commission on Human Rights. It is an intergovernmental body, consists of 47 UN members. The other one is UN Office of the High Commission of Human Rights. Both their activities are not like flesh and bone. They appear to have good relationship, but the Human Rights Council is a political body, and Office of the High Commission of Human Rights Office comes directly under the High Commissioner. Even though HRC is the politicized body, countries which respect human rights use report statements and press releases of the High Commissioners to scrutinize any violating states. If a wrong signal comes from the High Commission of Human Rights, then the decision of the member states also end up in disaster. Therefore, one cannot underestimate the task of High Commissioner for Human Rights. So I can briefly talk about Human Rights High Commissioner's Office, which has 4 different divisions to look into any aspects of any of their member countries. And Human Rights Council is a UN Charter-based body, and you all know very well the presently Universal Periodic Review, which is a new theme which is considered by the Human Rights Council to scrutinize their member countries. And also there are special procedures. Those days TCHR, Tamil Center for Human Rights, contributed a lot, and there are 43 special rapporteurs, different special rapporteurs, and there are 10 treaty bodies on various subjects, on especially Human Rights Committee and all. If I go into all these in detail, it will consume a lot of time, so I want to concentrate more on the political front, which may be interested to most of you. So let me come to the subject of political front, or in modern terms you can say it's a reconciliation process or whatever it is. Even though our political demands existed in the island before the independence in 1948, nothing has ever been officially endorsed in the UN General Assembly or the UN Security Council, except on the 5th October 1978, when a short speech was made by UK-based lawyer, the late Mr. Krishna Vaihundavasan, and India's interventions in the UN General Assembly in October 1983 and September 1984. I presume that most of you are aware how the speech was made by Mr. Vaihundavasan. He impersonated then Sri Lankan Foreign Minister A.C.S. Hamid and addressed the UN General Assembly. It is to be noted that during that period, the present Prime Minister Ranil Wickremesinghe was the Deputy Foreign Minister of Sri Lanka. The speech made by Mr. Vaihundavasan in the General Assembly is a good example for Ulam diaspora, intellectual, academics and professionals to realize what an asset they could be to their destroyed nation. They should voluntarily and fully heartedly come forward with dedication to save their people and their land. However, I am not advising or motivating anyone to impersonate Mangala Samaravira and make speeches in the Human Rights Council. But they could find a way to do constructive work to safeguard their homeland if they commit time and energy to it. Our youth have crucial role to play in the UN. Before they start to act in the UN, they should master the UN mechanisms. To match any government career diplomat, the personalities with equal capabilities among the Tamil diaspora should come forward. This is one of the reasons that I gave up a well-salaried job in the computing and in early 90s started to educate myself in the field of human rights and international diplomacy. The failures of the Palestinian struggle and Islam struggle are based on having more emotional activism rather than a smart, high-profile lobby and political approach. I do not agree with the explanation that as long as Russia and China are in the Security Council, nothing is impossible concerning Sri Lanka. On a global level, China and Russia had kept silent when there were resolutions passed on their friendly countries. A good example is that Sudan was referred to the International Criminal Court. On top of this, we cannot ignore the fact it was USSR, present Russia, which used its veto power 3 times against the then Ceylon, becoming a member of the UN in 1948 and 1949. Therefore, due to our failure in making any constructive efforts in attempt to along with the right path, the Tamil cause has not moved even an inch in the United Nations political front. However, the political aspiration of the Ilam Tamil shifted from the mandate given by the people of the North and East in the general election in 1977. This is one of the achievements of a different Sri Lankan governments and their lobbyists. Now our political demand has gone out of shape, it's pleading for nothing. There are Ilam Tamils, especially Tamil diaspora, talking about holding referendum supported by the international community to find a durable solution. When one talks about international community here, obviously they are referring to UN Security Council and UN General Assembly. A referendum within UN member state can be dedicated by only two bodies unless the government itself decides. Here one should ask whether we Ilam Tamils have reached that stage in the UN. When war intensified in 2006, there were only a few informal discussions in the UN Security Council. That's all. Whether it is Eritrea, East Timor, South Sudan, or Kosovo, these nations spent months and years in New York doing their high-profile lobby with the UN Security Council and General Assembly, and they achieved their goals. To my knowledge, there is no Ulam political activist with the UN Security Council or UN General Assembly. I strongly believe that the referendum is just an emotional talk show rather than a meaningful idea of constructive action. Now I will talk about India. Thank you very much. We cannot ignore the Indian factor in our journey in the UN. My observation is that for obvious reason, India may not help us on accountability in Geneva, but they may come forward to help us on reconciliation in New York. This needs deep analysis and pragmatic approach in India. On 21st October 1983, the Minister of Tamil Nadu, State Government, Mr. Pandruti Ramachandran addressed the Special Political Committee of the UN General Assembly under international cooperation to avoid new flows of Tamil refugees from Sri Lanka into India. Then again, on the same issue, on 27 1984, an Indian representative made a speech in the 39th session of the UN General Assembly. India also made several interventions regarding human rights situation in Sri Lanka in the Commission on Human Rights, Subcommission on Human Rights in Geneva in 1983, 84, 85. These are historical factors forgotten by many in India, Sri Lanka and among the diaspora. When it comes to strategic importance, India has to safeguard the homeland of the Tamils in the north and east. If India fails in its approach, in few years, some external powers will fire missiles and artillery from the north and east of Sri Lanka into India. Also, arms and ammunition will be supplied to some ethnic groups which are fighting for separate state in India. I presume that this impending danger has not been realized by Indian decision makers when they make poorly analyzed decisions. They always regret in the end. My conclusion, even though there are many Tamil organizations and associations in the United Kingdom, my understanding is that MEOT, Medical Institute of Tamil, and the Tamil lawyers are only two professional organizations. If any other Ilam professional organization exists for engineers, accountants, and any other profession, do include these as well. These professional organizations have an important role to play to safeguard their nation from being totally destroyed. Globally, when we come Look at the other ethnic struggle. They are professional, diaspora, medical doctors, legal professionals and others contributing a lot towards conflict resolution. Charity work alone will not help when there is a deep-rooted political problem. Internationalization of Tamil diaspora professional organization will be one of the best approach. I mean, they could work in solidarity with other international organizations in the field. This could have a good impact on the Tamil cause. Now let me conclude by giving some suggestions towards Geneva. Everyone is anxious about what will happen in the 34th session of the Human Rights Council in Geneva in March 2017. If we don't provide the right input into it, we cannot expect anything positive in March 2017. First of all, High Commissioner of Human Rights has to be convinced of the government cover-up approach with the motive of eye-washing the international community. Try to meet him personally or write him a very short letter explaining the reality in Sri Lanka. Secondly, what we have achieved today, up to today in the Human Rights Council, has not been done by us alone. Therefore, international organizations like Amnesty International, Human Rights Watch, International Crisis Group should be lobbied with the help of moderate human rights activists from the South, as well as some Western activists. Of course, there are some Western activists attempting to force their agenda on us without knowing who is exactly backing them. We neither refuse nor accept their approach. Thirdly, it is not possible to achieve anything in the 34th session without a proper lobby with a useful state like US, UK, EU countries, Canada, and some Southern American and African countries. Wherever the Tamil diaspora resides, they should find a way of convincing the Ministry of Foreign Affairs in their respective countries. The new Secretary General, Mr. Antonio Grosso from Portugal, which was the very first colonial master of the island. He knows the true history of the island. As a head of the UNHCR, he visited Sri Lanka during the heavy fighting in July 2006. Therefore, the day he assumes duty, we have a duty to congratulate and remind him about the UN obligation and accountability and reconciliation in Sri Lanka. We should keep in mind Portugal is part of the EU. For the victims to find justice and for a durable political solution with dignity, we must also work with Commonwealth and with European Union and Parliament, which have contributed a lot to our issues in the past. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Peter Wagner. Now, next speaker is Tu Senan. He's going to be speaking about building the Tamil national liberation struggle. There's a slight change in the title. Senan is he's an international coordinator of Tamil Solidarity, which was formed to stop the slaughter of Tamils. He's a left activist fighting for the legitimate rights of Tamils in Lanka. He has been actively involved in lobbying for the Tamil cause, including the European Union. He is the author of the book titled The History of Resistance, which looks at the Lanka history from a socialist viewpoint. He is also a novelist in Tamil. He has published a novel called The Londoners. Your turn.
Thanks, Chair. And comrades, brothers and sisters. Let me start, first of all, thanking the organizers, TIC, Tamil Information Center, for doing this, because it's a quite important dialogue to have, I think, is to bring together various stakeholders, various organizations to put forward what they think, what we're planning to do, and so on. And this particular dialogue is only at the beginning stage. For a long time, we've been asking various organizations, what do you think, what are you going to do, and etc., etc. And in these sort of forums and the meetings are quite vital to exchange. As you can see from the previous discussions and the ongoing discussion, there is the higher emphasis need to be put on in terms of non-existence of the homogeneous view. And it's the unity of the Tamil masses in terms of expressing their identity and protecting some of what they want against the Sri Lankan government. It doesn't mean that there is a united view in terms of how this can be taken forward. So from that point of view, it is extremely important to share it. So I'll try to kind of summarize some points maybe relevant to that, which is quite in disagreement with some of the previous speaker also, as well as some of the speakers we might hear tomorrow and today as well. But again, it's the point of discussion. We have to continue to discuss. First of all, the point in terms of how do we approach building the Tamil struggle from the point of view of kind of the development across the world and also in South Asia. One of the key feature, I mean, those who study physics, they know this thing called the steady state. The kind of system gravitate towards a certain equilibrium all the time. Boiling water, for example, then it comes back to the same, so on, etc., etc. I mean, it applies to politics as well. There are fundamental laws that governs the current political system, the capitalist system, always trying to push towards these fundamental laws. For example, one of the aspects of that, what we see now, particularly prominent after the election of Trump in the US presidential election, is the reversal of the globalization process. I'm not saying it's already began, but you can see the trend towards of the reversal of the globalization process, which is in contradiction to what Karl Marx was saying. That we need to observe. And in relation to this, we could observe there are a few other features. One is a significant inequality that exists, and a number of people know that very well, which is historical, particularly if you consider this particular system, but also the multipolar world, and I'm sure Sudha went into some of the discussion, and unipolar kind of domination led by the US is smashed. Is the fall of US as a main dominant force in the world is one of the key features we need to take into consideration, and the rise of China and so on. What it means to geopolitics is that there are various forces act on a particular country or a particular interest of a particular country, which means it can be pulled in various different directions. There is no clarity or one-dimensional approach that we can take, because it is often misunderstood that, okay, the West, okay, there's that direction with China, and in this direction. As we can see, a massive oscillation that takes place, particularly in the small countries. Let us take the example of a Colombo port city, where this has been, if you follow the Reuters report about who is going to control, what is going to happen in relation to this, you will see a zigzag map of kind of the various interests going on. But it is also a question related to the neo-colonial character of these states. The sovereignty of these particular states is questionable. Why? Because they cannot control it. Look at the budget that is being proposed. If you read the agreement with the IMF, and then if you look at the budget proposals in Sri Lanka, it reads same. So how and why they cannot control is the character of neo-colonial character. It's not time to go into detail. I mean, because of that, and various shift in, there is no steady kind of particular strategy we could take at this particular stage. Another thing that I would just kind of mention is the CPEC agreement, probably already been discussed in terms of China-Pakistan economic corridor, but also opposing to that, the pivot to Asia, Obama's pivot to Asia policy by the US. But that the economic component of that, the TPP, Trans-Pacific Partnership, is going to change. After the Trump election, there is no support within the US, even within the US for it. So the question now is that what is going to replace it? But within that particular gap, it could be something brutal, but it could be pushing towards the nation state getting much more stronger. But at the same time, within this gap, China have established quite a significant control through the CPEC. And these are there is no fixed direction. That's the point of this. So with this, and as we can see, particularly in South Asian region, a national question is intensified. to push towards, and it ebbs and flows from Tamil Nadu to Pashtun, the national question ebbs and flows. However, there are many flashpoints of exchange or proxy war, even the direct exchange in terms of war can take place. Like we can see that a part of that in Kashmir. And such is the tense situation that exists in South Asia. And from this background, that we look at Tamil questions, where we are placed at this stage. If you look at that, there is aspect of India also we've got to consider just before that in terms of what's happening in Tamil Nadu. There's a significant change. It's a kind of collapse of political system is part of the future in terms of the old populist leadership and